Hey guys, so today's video is going to be talking about the old Pulsa Prime Carburetors, Briggs and Stratton. And these were the last carburetor on tank carburetors that Briggs used. And then it got changed to the metal carburetor with the float with the gas tank mounted above it and it gravity fed to it. And now we got the ones that's got the black plastic whole carburetor and it's gravity fed to it. This is kind of the last carb on tank that Briggs produced on the lawnmower engines. This one's the same, a bit cleaner. We're also going to talk about changing the primer bulb. Both of these motors have issues. The deck's rusted on this one quite a bit, and it's been sitting outside, so there's probably water in the gas and everything. So I'm going to determine which one's going to be the best for the video. Both these are identical. This one just has the plastic covering on it. Other than that, it's the exact same engine. Okay, so I determined this one's going to be the best one to work on for this video. I was going to show you how to replace the primer bulb anyway, and this is all indented and stuck in there, so it'll be a good example for that. I did spray a little bit of carburetor cleaner in the intake and cranked it over, and it was running on that, and the engine wasn't smoking. Obviously it won't keep running because the tank's full of old gas and the diaphragm, everything's messed up. Typical 3.5 horsepower Briggs. This is when they started going by torque. I don't know why they did that, just a bigger number to make it look more impressive, but it's the same old engine pretty much. It does have the dipstick on it and the blade brake system. This has always been one of my favorite carburetors, and if you don't want to mess with rebuilding it and cleaning it, you can actually buy the whole new tank with the carburetor already on it. All you have to do is put it on there and put the linkages on there, and your air filter back on. It's also available for approximately $30 off Amazon right now, so you can also rebuild it for like $5. So we're going to try to rebuild it just to show you. There's also going to be a separate video talking about just the linkages. That way, if you just need that, it'll be easier to find. So the first thing we got to do is take the air breather off just so you can get to everything. And it's just a straight drive screw. It goes into the carburetor, and this whole assembly will come off. You can see the air filter shot, so we have to put a new air filter in. This is the carburetor, super simple. And here's the linkages. So this is off the air vane governor. On the video talking about the linkages, we'll take the cover off so I can show you how the air vane governor works and everything. This is actually the idle speed setting. You can bend this tab to adjust it. And this is actual the throttle control and your main governor spring. So that's kind of an overview of that before you start taking it apart. You also have this vent tube that connects in here. The only thing I've never liked about these engines, it's got this little metal or plastic tube that runs all the way underneath there to the other side where the intake valve's at. That's the only thing I never did like about them, but other than that, it's never been a problem. Tank's full of nasty old gas that smells like varnish. You know the smell. Okay guys, these carburetors are fairly simple to take off. You got a 1/2-inch drive bolt here and a 3/8 drive bolt here. Take this one out. There's like a spacer behind there. It's connected, but sometimes they'll fall off. Sometimes you just got to kind of pay attention to that. It's a fairly long bolt, so put that to the side. I'll get a 3/8 ratchet socket and take this one loose. I've always liked the simplicity of these carburetors. Now, you just pull it off like this. We'll explain here in a little bit of what's going on with that. Now you got to take your carburetor linkage loose. Let me show you how to do that. So when you're wiggling around, you usually get it in a vertical position. It'll just pull right off like that, and you're left with your carburetor and tank. Remember, this will be full of gas if it's been used. This pipe that you see sticking out right here is what I was talking about. It's a tube that runs all the way to the other side of the engine. It bolts to the top of the block. There's an O-ring inside the carburetor, you see right here. It's just kind of like a press fit, and it seals itself off. This is a crankcase vent tube, and it connects to this elbow. So when you're putting this back together, make sure this elbow is on the carburetor. If not, it's extremely hard, almost impossible to put on with the carburetor already mounted. Okay, before we start taking this apart, I'm going to try to clean up the external of the tank a little bit, blow it off, and spray some carburetor cleaner and dump the old gas out and see what kind of shape the inside of the tank's at, and we'll look at it in just a second. So the inside of the tank is in pretty bad shape, so I'm going to clean this up a little bit off camera. I did blow everything up and it cleaned up pretty good. I'm going to put some penetrating oil and some kerosene or something in here and some nuts and bolts and just slosh it around and try to get everything broke up and flush it out, and we should be good to go to continue on rebuilding and cleaning the carburetor. I always like to do this first just to avoid any contamination to the new parts going in the carburetor. Unless you got a motor like this that's been sitting for a long time, you're probably not going to have to clean the tank out like this. If you've been using it every year, your tank's probably going to be clean, but if it's been sitting for a long time, that's when it's going to gum up like this. So skip this if your tank is clean and in good shape. This is just for an extreme case. Now I'm going to put some bolts and stuff in here. And slosh this around. And flush it out, and we'll look at it in a little bit. Okay, so I got the tank cleaned up inside and out the best I can. I'm going to remove this elbow. Like I said, don't forget to put that back on. There's actually a little gasket here. You got 5 screws, Phillips drive screws, that hold the carburetor to the tank. So you want to remove all these. I'm just going to take all these out. Okay, I've got all the screws removed. And the carb will usually be stuck to the tank, and you pull up like this, and just pull straight up, kind of wiggle the pickup tubes around. These carburetors have 2 pickup tubes. This is the main one that pumps the fuel out of the main tank, and it dumps it out into this little tiny reservoir right here, and the smaller tube will pick it up and actually pull it into the carburetor. So the diaphragm acts as like a fuel pump to pump the fuel out of the tank into this reservoir. And the only reason it's designed like this, if there's gas this close to the carburetor, it's going to pull it in easier than if it had to pump it all the way from the bottom of the tank. So that's the only reason for that. A lot of times if the tank is in really bad shape, this will start rusting or corroding. You'll get pinholes in it, and the gas won't stay in this. It'll take like 4 or 5 pulls to get the motor to keep running. So in this carburetor, you see there's a screen right here on this tube. You just wiggle that and it comes off, and you'll have a new one in the kit. Most of the time you can actually clean these and reuse them unless they're deteriorated. You have a screen on the bottom of this that you can just spray off, and when you're spraying through the carburetor, you'll get it to come out. And there's also a little spring right here on that bump. That's what works the diaphragm. And this is probably what's wrong with it. This diaphragm will be stretched right here, and as you see, it's just all the way down, and it's not going to do anything. There's a gasket and a diaphragm here. You have to pay attention to how it is. If you get it together wrong, it will not work. The diaphragm goes on the bottom, and the gasket goes on the top. Okay, now let's get the carburetor kit, look at the new parts, and we'll get to cleaning this. This is what the kit will look like. And these are still being produced just like this. You can buy it off the shelf at a lot of places where you can buy parts for lawnmowers and stuff. I recommend making sure it's a complete kit with the spring and the screen. That's the part number it comes up. That's on this package. There's another part number for it, but that's probably all you need to go buy for the new kits. And the primer button bulb. It'll come with that plastic clip that locks it in. Right there's the part number for it. So that'll pretty much all you'll ever need for these carburetors, unless you have to replace the whole tank or the whole carburetor. This is what the alcohol that's in gasoline does, the ethanol. Just remove most of it like that just so you can get to it. And you can press in these tabs that's on both sides of this. That'll pop the ring out. Yeah, be careful not to break the carburetor, especially when it's all stuck like this. You usually gotta slowly get it started like that on both sides. And you have to get all the old primer button out of this. Sometimes it's going to be challenging when it's all sticky like this. Just take your time, make sure you get it all out. And just continue to clean it up until you get all of it out. Okay, got all of it out, so now the whole carburetor is just by itself. You want to spray off any dirt you see with carburetor cleaner. Make sure you got safety glasses on. There's the actual throttle plate. You want to spray down through here, it will come out here. You just want to, any hole you see where fuel might come out of, just spray the carburetor cleaner through it to get any passages cleaned out. You can also use compressed air. I'm going to do this off camera to avoid getting everything sprayed up on the camera. So I cleaned and blew off the best I could. You shoot carburetor cleaner down this little port here, it'll come out of here. And down through here, it'll come out the jet of the carburetor. You just want to make sure everything's going through everywhere. You also need to clean out the tank and scrape off any parts of the gasket or diaphragm that's stuck to it. Make sure this is real clean before you put it back together. So I'm going to clean this out and we'll look at reassembly. So I got all this cleaned up. I actually like to take a file and just lightly clean it up. You just want to see it clean up like that. You don't have to go extreme with it, but that just always helps. So now we're ready for reassembly. Like I said, your gasket goes on top. I used to get confused on that a lot, but the diaphragm part is on the bottom. So you have a gasket and diaphragm. Okay, so in the kit, you got instructions you might want to take a look at. You have the new screen for the small pickup tube, which serves as a fuel filter. A new spring. I recommend changing the spring, even if your old one looks good. A lot of times it could be getting weak, and you just want to change it just to be on the safe side. So let's go ahead and get this ready. So the spring just pops on here. And the screen will slide right over that. That's all there is to it. That's all you got to do on the carburetor itself. Like I said, this has already been cleaned. This is actually a replaceable part in case yours breaks off or something. So now you're ready to set the diaphragm on here, just like that. And the gasket goes on. And when you go to put the carburetor on, your long pickup tube goes in this open slot like this. What I recommend doing is just getting a couple of the screws, make sure it goes through the diaphragm and the gasket. Sometimes you just got to wiggle everything. Get all the screws started before you go tightening anything. That way you know you're not going to pinch or damage the gasket or diaphragm. Been there and done that. So now we're going to snug all these down. Remember, you're just going into the plastic carburetor. So just remember, it's just a plastic carburetor, so it's going to be easy to crack this. You just barely got to snug it, but you don't want it too loose where you'll get gas leaking around this. Let me get all these snug. Okay, all the screws are tight. You want to go in like a crisscross pattern as you see me start doing there. That just puts the pressure down evenly, keeps from having any problems. So now we're ready to install the primer bulb, then we'll be ready to put the carburetor back on the engine. The primer bulb usually goes in a lot easier than they come off. And these will be in different colors too. This one just happens to be red like the original one. I've seen black ones. It seemed like I've seen a white one before. It just depends on the brand if you get aftermarket ones. So you want to line up these tabs with the slots. When you press it in, it'll lock in. You probably have to take a screwdriver and just press it in until it snaps. Sometimes it can be kind of tricky. Yeah, there's that side. And there's that side. Okay, now you're ready for installation. Some kits will come with this O-ring. If you want to replace that, or if you need to, you take a screwdriver and gently pry on this little ring that's inside here, and it'll pop off, and the O-ring will just sit in there, and you pop that back in. It's not that hard to change out. Just kind of see how it comes out like that. Then you're left with just a standard O-ring that you can change out if it's necessary. If it's in good shape, just go with it. If it's bad, don't be tempted to try to use it without changing it, because it won't seal, and the engine will try to run too lean because it'll be pulling in air right there. And there's no fuel mixture adjustment on these. Now it's ready to go back on the engine. It's just a reverse procedure. Don't forget to hook your linkage up. Just like that. And I almost did what I told you not to do. I almost forgot to put the little elbow back on here. Get that started on that line right there. Now all this goes back together just like it was. Make sure the linkages move free. So now you're ready to start putting your bolts in. That little tip, just get both of these bolts started. Don't tighten one up without the other one first. And just make it easier to put together. I recommend tightening the bigger one first. It's just the way I've always done it, because it just seems like it always seems to work. This don't have to be super tight. And if this ever strips out when you tighten it, if you got patience, you could probably get just a little bit of a longer bolt and put a nut on there if you absolutely had to. Never had to do that, but I don't see why you couldn't. Same thing here. If this ever strips out, unless it breaks off, you can get by with throwing that 2 on it. Now this little tiny gasket goes on here that seals the air filter off, which is good to keep water out when you're spraying it off or something. Now let me get a new air filter, and we'll change the air filter and put some gas in it and see what happens. Which air filter is pretty straightforward. The old filter just comes out. You could probably got by reusing it for another year or 2, but so we'll just make the video complete and change the filter. There's mixed opinions on this. Some manufacturers recommend squeezing like a teaspoon of motor oil into the air filter. That way the dust particles stick to it better. I don't usually do that. I just put them in here dry, and I've never had any issues or anything. But if you really want to follow the manufacturer specs, feel free and put a little bit of oil on it. Now you can actually buy this whole assembly with the filter already in it at probably the same store that you got your diaphragm and stuff at for about $7 or $8 usually. This is the plastic part. The older engines had a metal one on it. And the notch right here goes just like this, so you don't lose your gasket. Again, you don't want to get carried away with this. Just barely got to snug it. Just like that, and you're good to go. So now, let's put some gas in it and see what happens. And we have a leak. There's a pinhole in the bottom of the gas tank. You can see. We can still test the engine. We just got to be careful. We don't want to start a fire or anything. So you want to prime this about 3 times after you hear the gas going into it. There's no choke or anything on these carburetors. You just prime them and go. And it seems like it's running a little bit of a high RPM, so let me check the linkages here. It seems like it's running better. The springs or something's not right on here and it's acting up, but you make sure your primer button's working. You'll see it spray that fuel in there like that. That's what primes it every time I start it. Well guys, I guess that's about it. I just want to make a video on this type of carburetor. I've been asked about it before. A long time ago, I restored another old push mower, and it had this carburetor on it. I hit and missed on it a little bit. Didn't really go into too much detail, so hopefully this answers any questions y'all had about that. So, thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next video.